I had to go all the way to Newberry Library, which is way up north, just to dive deeper into the history of North Lawndale. And I found out a lot of things that I didn't necessarily know growing up. Like for example, the conservative vice lords used to have an art gallery on 16th, like right off of Hamlet.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Notes from Chicago. I'm Ashley Phillips, and this week we have Johnny Jones. Johnny is a documentary filmmaker in Chicago. He's created a series about Lawndale that we're eager to hear about. He's also the founder and CEO of the Lingo Chicago. Johnny, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be on.
What do you love about Chicago?
First and foremost, I love that we are uniquely us. There's a lot of things about Chicago that really only happens in Chicago. So if you're from Chicago, you can go anywhere in the world. You can still bring Chicago with you. So I think that's the one thing I love the most, that we can't really be duplicated in a lot of ways.
What are some things that you think are uniquely Chicago?
For one, our lingo, like we have a very interesting, dialect and slang and how we talk in different ways. Summertime shy, like I've never been to a place in the summer that does it like we do. I don't know what it is. Maybe because our winters are so brutal sometimes. So the anticipation of summertime shy is really amazing. The food, I love the food here, the culture, the music, the history. There's just so many, I can go on and on.
So let's start with our Lawndale Stories. That's a short film that is available on YouTube. And talk to me about what inspired it and what's your connection to Lawndale?
So I grew up in North Lawndale. I am originally from Rockwell Gardens, which was a housing project on the west side. I lived there until I was about 8 after my mom passed, and then my grandmother became my legal guardian. And I just remember growing up in Lawndale and just not having a lot of access to things, right? And so in my early 20s, I did this experiment where I moved to Lincoln Park for like 3 years because I just really wanted to know what it was like to walk out of the house and go to a coffee shop or go play pool or whatever, just to really have access, which I didn't have in North Lawndale. So a part of me just really wanted to see what that looked like and then really work towards trying to bring something back to my community where I can sort of have that feeling and people who live there can have that feeling. So that's really where it came from originally.
With the film itself, it starts with someone kind of talking about Lawndale, rapping about Lawndale, and you kind of go from that to the landscape of the neighborhood, and then also community meetings, the people talking about what's going on in the neighborhood or what could be going on in the neighborhood. What did you learn from talking to all those different residents?
There's a lot of different perspectives. There's so much, and I'm really excited about part 2 and part 3 because it's a 3-part series. But I really wanted to capture sort of the essence of all of these different, from a music and artist perspective, from a like community engagement perspective. We call them old heads, so people who were there before I was, right, or before my generation. I didn't learn a lot of new things in a sense of growing up from there, so I already knew that those things were happening. I think what was unique about it for me is everyone's perspective was different, right? I did a lot of like archiving, and I'm not like a librarian or that type of person. I love reading, but I had to go all the way to Newberry Library, which is way up north, just to dive deeper into the history of North Lawndale. And I found out a lot of things that I didn't necessarily know growing up. Like for example, the conservative vice lords used to have an art gallery on 16th, like right off of Hamlin, right? I would have never known that if I didn't like go dive into all of these things that came from the community, from a artist standpoint, from a music standpoint. So yeah, I didn't learn a lot of different things. It was just unique to hear all the different perspectives, especially how many like places there were in North Lawndale or on the west side, where people can go and hear live music, where people can kind of go to these dive bars and all of those sort of things. So that was fascinating for me because I was like, where, So yeah,
You have some archival or what looks like archival footage in the short. Did you get that from Newberry Library? Where did you find that?
I did not. So there's this amazing guy named Paul Norrington. He I think what stood out to me about him is he has this very like Morgan Freeman-esque voice where like he has that unique voice where it's him when he's talking. And so his father used to be really big into like film and videography and that sort of thing. So all of that footage came from his father, like shooting the parades that were going down Roosevelt or 16th, whatever street that was. And so there's this group called North Lawndale Historians or History or something like that. So I did some deep diving in there, like within that group, and ended up talking to Paul and being like, hey, can I use this footage because I'm doing this short? So that's really how that came about. And, sometimes you just really got to go look for things. So that really came from just from archiving and then just having a conversation with Paul and knowing who he was.
What made you want to kind of center around artistic and creative spaces in Lawndale?
For starters, I mean, just they're non-existent, right? I've always loved music in a sense of just how it makes me feel, right? I love different genres of music, and when I picked up the camera, I started to capture different musicians. Now, this started way back when I was doing like house concerts, right? I had this apartment in North Lawndale that had this huge front living room space, and I always used to think, man, I got to take advantage of this space, and that was when the Lingo kind of first started. And it started with DJing. So we used to have these house concerts, and then musicians used to come over and sort of play. And that was really to just kind of give them a space in our community where they can perform live music. And so for me, it was really trying to continue to tell a story on why certain musicians would have to leave to go to West Loop or South Loop or, downtown or up north or whatever, but anywhere besides their like home base neighborhood, specifically on the West Side. So that really like pushed me to want to tell that story, to bring more awareness around why these physical spaces don't exist, right? Why don't nobody talk about it, right? And that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that was originally where that came from, just to really shed some light on why we don't have any creative physical spaces for Black and brown people.
The film did feature at least a few spaces where people were playing music,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if that's in Lawndale or not.
It
I think.
wasn't.
Oh, okay. That was Lemon.
One was Lemon, and that's like right off. Well, I don't even really know what neighborhood that is. That's right off of like Ashland and like Grand or something like that. But the idea was to show, and I think specifically that band that I kind of was collabing with, they do a lot of work outside of their community, right? So there is like one or two spaces, well, actually one, which is Principal Barbers. Bobby does a great job of doing these like jazz shows. But it's still a barber shop at the end of the day, right? He just has a stage and he's a creative. And so that made sense for him to do that. And it's great, but at the same time, it still doesn't give you like a live space sort of feel, right? Like it doesn't give me a Lazy Bird kind of feel. It doesn't give me the basement kind of feel. So, but I did want to highlight those musicians in particular, just to sort of tell their story on why, we have to go to these different places outside of our neighborhood.
You developed this project through a residency at the School of the Art Institute. How did that happen?
There's a lady, and I want to make sure I shout her out because she's not there anymore. Jacqueline Jankunsky, I think that's it. I'll say her last name right. In North Lawndale, there's the old Nichols Tower, or the old Sears Tower, I would call it, where they have a space that's dedicated to North Lawndale, SAIC wise, and so the plan was over that for as long as I can remember, and at least 10 plus years, right? So, a huge shout out and kudos to her because she was just really intentional about being intentional about making sure that people from North Lawndale were taking advantage of this residency, right? And so, a few years ago, like two or three of my friends kept getting them. And I had never like applied for the, residency because just other stuff was going on. And so last year I was like, you know what? I've been really like eager to get this like short film out, and this is my chance. There's no more excuses. So I put this great pitch together, and it helped that I knew Jacqueline, so I kind of gave her, hey, I'm gonna submit, and they judged it fairly. Like, it wasn't no favoritism or anything like that. I felt really confident in my pitch. And so that's really how that happened. And it was really great. It was a 6-month residency. I had full access to School of Art Institute Chicago downtown. They also accommodated me with the space in the Nichols Tower that I rarely used. I really only used it to just sort of plan out how I wanted to shoot things, and then I would think everything else sort of happened outside. But it was a great opportunity, and I'm very grateful for it because sometimes all we need is an opportunity, right? And there was funding behind it, so I was able to accommodate the artists who were guests on the show or on the film. And I was able to get everything that I needed to make sure it was quality, work. So, but I'm forever grateful for that opportunity from Jacqueline.
That's so cool. I'm sure she will appreciate the shout out for sure. When people watch the current, sort of the first installment of this series, and then I want to talk about what's going to be in the second and third installment, what do you want people to take away from it?
More than anything, I want them to really look at North Lawndale as a place of creativity, a place where you don't necessarily have to be afraid to come to. I think that's a huge part of why these spaces don't exist or why they didn't last, because we get this bad rep. Even thinking about like, and I won't throw anybody under the bus, but even just thinking about what I did after the film was finished, and I started to get interest in it in a sense of a Chicago reader doing a write up, right? It playing on Can TV, right? Those are all things that, and then sending out media pitches to all of these different outlets, right? And then having to learn from a certain producer at one, news outlet on what it takes to actually get attention for something like what I did. And it's at the end of the day, it's just this like run around in a sense, and it just makes me feel like people don't necessarily always want to talk about the good things that are happening in the hood per se. But I really want them to just see that, music is still a thing that happens and comes out of North Lawndale. Just really thinking about when the Great Migration first happened, and everybody sort of came from the South and sort of took over the West and South side musically, especially Bronzeville. But we still have dope things happening in North Lawndale, and we have some amazing creatives and people who are really just trying to continue to put us on the map. So I think that's what I really want them to see.
What would you tell people about Lawndale who've never been?
I think have an open mind. Um, there's been a lot of development in the last 5 years. I mean, we have a fitness center, we have a health center, we have a few cafes now. The restaurant dining thing is starting to rev up a little bit. I think just to have an open mind, and there's a lot of beautiful things, a lot of beautiful greenery, a lot of our vacant lots and abandoned buildings are getting, remodeled, and things is getting restructured. I think to just really come into it with an explore, like just really you can explore. There's things in North Lawndale that you can explore, right? Historically, right? You think about where MLK used to live, right? Just all down 16th and all down Roosevelt. It's just a really beautiful place, but again, it gets stigmatized for all of the wrong things. So I think just to really have an open mind when you come here, it's more than what you hear about.
Talk to me about the second and third installment and kind of what you want to cover in these stories.
The whole idea was to tell it from three perspectives, right? So earlier I mentioned the old heads, right? And so part two will kind of touch on that from a civil rights sort of, Black Panthers and redlining and all of these things. Um, North Lawndale used to be predominantly a Jewish neighborhood, right? And then again, how we migrated up and really just kind of pushed the Jewish community out, or they left, so to speak. But so there's that perspective, and then my generation, my millennial generation perspective, and that'll look more artist and musician heavy. And then the third part, I really want to tell from the younger generation. What do they think about our community? What things do they want to see improve? And then just kind of end it with a hopefully surprising bang, but we'll see. I'm working on that, but I think just really touching on it from those different, generations, and really trying to complete the whole sort of spirit of what that community is and where we want to see it go.
What are you hearing from younger people? I'm curious who are living in the community.
It's funny because even with the whole team takeover thing that's happening right now,
Oh yeah.
there's so many opinions about it, right? Everybody has an answer. I don't have an answer, but what I will say is, as a parent, I can't tell my child what to do or how to do something if I'm not setting the example on what that looks like. And so I think it's so easy to just not think about that simple concept of, a lot of these young people, their parents aren't even fully capable of really being a parent, right? When I think about my childhood, my father wasn't really present in a lot of ways. He didn't really know how to do that, right? So for me, I always wanted to do the opposite, right? I wanted to be present for my children. And that looks like a lot of different things. You can be present, a lot of, recitals and, field trips and all these different things, and then just being there, right? So I feel like, and even when I grew up in North Lawndale, I'm very adventurous. So I used to just go do a lot of things, right? I play baseball, I play sports. I rode my bike to different communities, even though that was a little dangerous too back in the day. But it never stopped me, and I never felt like I didn't have anything to do, especially in the summer, right? If you say that you're bored in the summer, then you really need to look at what you view as, fun for yourself, because there's so many things to do in the summertime, right? So it's like, what? But I think ultimately too, you can, as a teenager, still enjoy the city and have fun without being destructive, right? And so, no matter what people are trying to say about the teens and they don't have things to do and this and that might be true in some cases, and depending on the neighborhood, but also you can still enjoy the city without wrecking it. So I'm seeing a lot of teens jumping on people's cars and doing all of that sort of thing. Like, that's nothing to do with being bored. Like, that's just, you understand what I'm saying? So it's just like, there has to be balance, and it's just like, if you want to be able to go to the lake, which is a public place, and just enjoy being at the beach without cops standing there blocking you from doing that, then don't be destructive, right? So it's just, And again, that starts at home. Like it's just how you parent and how you want your children to be a representation of you and your household. And when that's lost, then our teens are going to be lost. It's important if we had like a bowling alley in North Lawndale. It's important to have like an arcade in North Lawndale. Like we don't have those things. They're big right now on home ownership, which I think is very important. They're big on health, which I think is very important again. But it's like I'll go crazy if I don't have anything in my neighborhood. There's a lot of youth programs. Don't get me wrong, amazing youth programs. Some that I've even worked at before, who are doing amazing things. But again, those teenagers and those children, their parents know about that. They're bringing them there, right? You got to show up to these community meetings. You got to know what's happening in your community. Can't be upset when you're like, oh, they're buying up all the stuff. Like, well, come come learn about what's happening so you can be intentional about what's next for you and your family. But you get a lot of that. Teens feel like we don't really have a lot in our communities to keep them occupied, I guess they would say.
So not as many like sort of hangout spaces or,
No, no. It's interesting what people view as hanging out. Like I've never was one to like stand on the corner and just hang out. Like
Mhm.
weird to me. Like if I had ops, they'll know where I'm at. Like, it's just like, what's the point of that? Like I want to go somewhere, especially in the summer. Like I don't want to be in my neighborhood in the summertime. Like I just don't. Like the city is way too big for me to just be standing on the block. Like I never understood it. It's the most absurd thing in my opinion.
This is a good segue into a podcast you have called the Fatherhood Podcast. Uh, tell me a little bit about that and what inspired it.
Well, I have two daughters, um, Grace and Olivia, 11 and 8. Yeah. I think that originally inspired it. I really wanted to have conversations with fathers um, who either had great relationships with their kids or some who didn't, right? Or some who had strained relationships with their children's mother. I really just wanted to shed more light on fathers in general in a sense of we can get the light can be dimmed in a lot of different ways. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, right? And it's like we're just as important as the mothers, and at the same time, it's not a competition either, right? I want to create something where we're not on here like bashing women or shaming mothers, I really wanted it to be constructive in a way where if a father who's a guest on a show has a terrible relationship with his children's mother, right? Giving them, pointers and different, things to do to sort of try to improve that, right? And we're constantly working on if you are intentional about it and if you have a certain love for your children, you should be always constantly trying to improve that and develop that. But yeah, so I'm excited to get the ball back rolling on that. Obviously, I had to take a hiatus because of the short film and everything that took. But next month we're back rolling, so I'm excited about that.
We haven't talked much about the Lingo Chicago. Reading about it and in the way that you've described it, it's a very seems very ambitious and pretty far-reaching. So, talk to me a little bit about it.
No, I'm glad you said that. That's good. So very very funny origin story. I always knew that I wanted to own my own like business, whatever that would be. My very first job was at a Ace Hardware store when I turned 15. So my little league baseball coach, his father started a hardware store in Chicago, and I mean they had so many. But anyway, I used to always joke with him and say, "Hey, when I turn 15, are you going to give me a job?" He said, "Yeah, as soon as you get your work permit, blah blah blah." So when my birthday came in April, I bought him the work permit. I was like, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready to work, you know? So for a long time, from 15 all the way up until I left for college, all I knew was hardware stuff. I even thought like, man, I'm gonna have my own hardware store one day. But I knew really that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I've always been like the connector of people um, in a lot of different ways, mostly socially, musically. So fast forward to 2015. Okay, no, my freshman year of college, I went to a school in Canton, Ohio, of all places. Um, and I remember this was when like Facebook like first started, like, and one of my best friends to this day, he had a house off campus, and I was like, "Oh, you got to let me throw a little kickoff party or whatever." And he's like, "All right, cool, put it together." And I'll never forget it. We called it the Ninth Street Jump Off. We used to live on Ninth Street or something. And when it all came together, I just remember standing and looking at this party, and I was like, wow, like I wanna do something like this. Like I wanna just connect people. And we had, black people, white people, people from other countries who went to this school because they were big on sports and soccer and all of this. So I just remember being like, man, I wanna do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I wanna do this to some degree, right? So now fast forward to 2015, my love for music sort of turned into DJing, right? So the Lingo Chicago really started with DJing. And fast forward a couple of years, I wanted to venture off into just really working with musicians around the city. So going back to that point I made earlier about this huge space that I had in my apartment, we used to have house concerts where local artists would come. I've even had a few artists come from other cities and perform in this house. And then once that got like big enough to where we couldn't fit enough people in that space, we started renting out views. And the way I wanted to do it was I wanted to pop up in different neighborhoods and then just fully embrace that neighborhood, right? So the first one was in West Garfield at 345 Art Gallery. I'll never forget it. And our headliner was from West Garfield, right? The food was from West Garfield, and all these different vendors kind of were, diverse. But that was the whole idea. And so we did a couple of those. And when a pandemic happened,
Mm-hmm.
I had to pick up the camera. So I couldn't host any more events. So I was like, okay, now my love for film kind of can come out, right? And then I was sort of forced to. And that started with a podcast, a buddy of mine. We had this podcast called Two Vegetarians Eating Chicken. I know.
Okay.
The reaction every time, which is great. We used to debate about so much stuff, and I was like, man, one day we gonna do a podcast since we always going back and forth. And we did. We did it for like 3 years, and it was great. The first year we kind of shot in my space, and then the second year we had an opportunity to sort of go live, like, and so we had like a live audience. People were able to like call in, so that was a really cool experience for me because I got to see it from that end, and then when I started doing it for people, it was just a cool experience. But the name, the Lingo Chicago, came from one day I was leaving my house in North Lawndale, and I used to have waves. I kind of switch up the styles every year, right? But I had waves, and I had my do rag on. So when you think about waves, you kind of put the do rag on overnight to when you take it off, make sure it's crispy and wavy under there, right? So I was leaving the house, and Dick Boys, we used to call them Dick Boys, Chicago police, but the ones who were in the unmarked cars, so we call them Dick Boys because they're dicks, pretty much. Sorry, can I say that on here?
Yes.
Um,
Okay. It's fine.
so one day I was coming out and walking to the train, the pink line at Pulaski, and they kind of rolled up right on me. And I wasn't necessarily startled because this isn't the first time it's happened to me, right? And they hop out, guns blazing, like right in my face. So I'm like, whoa, whoa. And they're like, oh, put your hands up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Yo, I'm just walking to the train. Like, what's good? I'm trying to go to work. Oh, we just had a call about a robbery or something, he was saying. I was like, bro, I just came out of the house. I'm about to go to work. Oh, you fit the description. And they said he had a do-rag on, blah, blah. I said, man, I got a do-rag on because it's wavy under here. You don't even know what's happening. And these are two white cops. And it threw him off. He was like, what? And I was like, and at the time I was trying to think of a name for my business that I knew I wanted to start. And I was like, bro, you don't even understand the lingo in this community. You can't be policing our neighborhood if you don't even know the lingo. And that stuck right away. And everything else they were saying, it was just kind of like a all I heard was lingo, lingo. That's it. That's the name of it. So I'm like weirdly excited in this like weird interaction. So anyway, they let me go. But as I'm on the train, I'm like taking notes, the lingo, and I'm like searching if the domain was taken and all these other things. And it was. So that's why I had to add the Chicago to it because somebody had the lingo.com. And anyway, he was being a jerk. He didn't want to sell it to me for cheap. But so that's really how it started. And everybody has a lingo. Everybody has something that makes up who they are, where they come from. But you'll never know that until you have a conversation with them. So that's really where it came from. And I always wanted to just create this space where people can sort of talk more and be social. And that's our motto, right? Talk more, be social. And it's been these variety of different things. And now here we are in the film. It's like this umbrella, right? And all of these
Yeah.
different things are under there. So sort of like a production house. And that's the dream for the physical space.
That's a great origin story. That's really funny, weirdly funny. I'm sorry that also that you experienced that as well. If you could create a creative or cultural space anywhere on the West Side, what would it look like? What would it feel like?
So it would be called the Lingo. And uh, during the day, so it would be like a production house. And so during the day, I would love to have some sort of like programming happening in a sense of where artists and musicians can kind of either come to rehearse or come, whatever. And then I love for it to look like this sort of like staging area. If people want to come do podcasts or video shoots or photography shoots. Really just sort of this creative co-working space of musicians, artists, and entrepreneurs. And then at night, I just want it to be live music. That's it. That's it. That's all I want. That's all I've dreamed. I had an opportunity to look at a space a week ago in North Lawndale. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. But
Amazing.
yeah. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It's such a journey, Ashley, and it's like a constant battle of, again, just trying to bring attention and awareness around this fact because we're adults, right? If I'm thinking about, I love live music, I love leisure time, right? And it's like, but it's almost like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's almost like it isn't relevant in a community like North Lawndale. And then you wonder why people are partying in the streets or people are, and it's just like, well, we don't have any place. So I really just want to create this very upscale sort of creative community-based place where people know that they can come and just enjoy a game of pool, enjoy some live music, and sip on some wine and go home after that. So that's really what I want to create in my neighborhood.
Fingers crossed, you're going to do it. I can tell just from this conversation, you're going to make it happen. All right, we are almost at the end of our time, but I always like to end the podcast this way. When people come visit, when you meet people who are new to Chicago, what are the things you tell them that they have to do in Chicago?
There's always this chicken debate between Harold's and Uncle Remus. I think that's a preference thing. I think they're both fine. I'm a foodie, so I mean it's your preference. But um, deep dish gets an interesting rap, and the names that people drop is always interesting to me. I'm a Pequods guy. I love Pequods. I think they have a lot of these deep dishes places, especially Giordano's and Luanati's. I take Pequods over them any day. And so I tell people that all the time. Don't go to Giordano's or Lou Malnati's, go to Pequod's. And then I think just really explore the music scene in Chicago. There's always something happening musically. There's always festivals happening, and then the best time to come is obviously in the summer. Don't come in the winter just unless you just like the winter time. But that's yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I've lived here most of my life, but I hate every winter. But there are some good things that happen in the winter too. And then, if you have kids, it's fun stuff that you can do. But I say come and enjoy the food and enjoy the music scene because you'll talk about it for a while.
Love it. Johnny, thanks so much for coming on today and spending this time. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Notes from Chicago. This podcast is edited and produced by Tanisha Blakely. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Notes from Chicago on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.